Thank you. This is a paper that Mr. Blas is patron. Mr. Blas, do you want to take a moment to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, we had a vigorous discussion about this at an informal, for the public's edification, this is simply a paper to encourage the Economic Development Authority to find a purchase price for the properties identified in the area of Shockoe Bottom that were part of same parcels that were included in the revitalized RVA plan, which had a 40-year lease for the properties. The intention of this is to offer the city another option to purchase the properties and assemble for development. It is merely a suggestion that we ask the EDA. The EDA has put in a lot of work last year. The property's been appraised, it's had environmental review, it's had other considerations. So the distance from point A to point B from a lease price to a purchase price should not be too extensive. Most of the deals that we've seen the EDA bring before us are deals that are packaged and already put together by the time we receive them. And this is an opportunity for us as council to be involved with initiating some economic development activity. We know that a lot of Shockoe Bottom needs to be developed. The Slave Heritage Site is already owned by the city. The other parcels that are identified in this resolution would create the opportunity to do what didn't happen last year, which is a vigorous community engaged process. I thank Ms. Robertson for wanting to add the amendment to this to make sure that whatever happens, the community is engaged and offered an opportunity to have their input before anything is decided. Sometimes it's better to lease, sometimes it's better to buy, sometimes it's better not to do anything. The city could do all three options, or have one of three options. But last year and earlier this year, we were afforded only one option with a plan that was not very open and transparent. And this is just the first step in correcting that. And I think that the council is interested in working with Economic Development Authority and the administration to propose economic development that makes sense for wherever it is, whether it's on Midlothian Turnpike or Jeff Davis Highway. The reason I believe these parcels are important is they could be purchased by VCU at some point, and if that is the case, they will not produce tax revenue for the city. I think the opportunity to look at buying the land and figuring out exactly how to incentivize it for private development later is a way to go that involves the community. And again, it's just a first step, but I think we need to move and do something rather than let Shockoe continue to sit as it is. Thank you.
Are there those in the audience tonight that wish to speak in support or opposition to this paper? All right, bring it back to council for any discussion. I saw Ms. Robertson's hand and Ms. Mosby. Ms. Mosby, Ms. Robertson yields her time to you, but wants it back in a minute.
Okay. I am just wanting to bring some clarity to, I intend to support your paper. However, when something comes, I need us to be diligent enough to know that their heritage site means a lot. And I need it on our forefront of our minds.
Absolutely, and I think, Mr. President, if I may, we took the first step by adding the $5 million last budget cycle, and I think if anything, that this will facilitate something happening, and I think everybody here supports that.
Ms. Roberts.
Good job on the minute, Councilwoman Mosley. I've had, I really have mixed emotion about this and I've attempted to try to get some additional information in regards to it. I want to thank Mr. Blouse for the amendment. I just want to make sure that the amendment that is added to this language is and I guess I need the attorney to help me to bring clarity to the amendment as to whether or not that this council is requesting that a economic development strategy for redevelopment of Shockoe Bottom which includes citizens' engagement. We've had, as you said earlier, Mr. Blouse, and I mean, ever since I've been on this council, we've been dealing with an economic development strategy for Shockoe Bottom, and we've spent a lot of time on this, and it appears that each time a development strategy comes to us, we end up spending months and months, but we don't get past this. And I really believe, and I think very strong, I support very strongly comments that were made earlier as it relates to the criteria that we use when we put together development deals, the weight that we place on what has been in the proposed city master plan. And I think that we desperately need a master plan for Shockoe Bottom. I think that the legislation that we adopted earlier this afternoon or evening in regards to the economic development strategy for Shockoe Bottom is a good plan, but it does not address the heritage site. It does not address the land that you are speaking, that this paper addresses. And it does not address a lot of the other needs that we know that have been discussed in different other development deals or proposed development deals for Shockoe Bottom. And so, whereas I'm not really sure that the amendment is clear to the extent that it makes it absolutely clear that we want a citizen engagement master plan for the Shockoe Bottom area to be presented and adopted, that the citizens are engaged in that process prior to any intent of assembling additional land. And so I'm hopeful that this amendment accomplished that objective. Mr. Attorney.
Ma'am, Madam Vice President, as I read the original language and the amending language, the amending language that calls for a community engagement process applies to the listed properties, not Shockoe as an area, but rather the listed properties, and their potential use as a facility for a commercial enterprise of an unspecified type, but which is language that's used to describe a project that the Economic Development Authority has the legal power to develop. So I would view the language as calling for the kind of process that I think you have in mind based on what you said. The only reservation I would suggest is that it is limited to these properties rather than Shockoe as a whole.
Would you like me to address that?
Would you?
I'd be happy to. Again, we don't have to purchase the properties where the slave heritage site are. That process can begin at any time as far as community engagement. We can easily incorporate that with these properties should they be acquired. Should they be acquired, should they not be acquired by the city, some other entity, then we still need to have a community engagement process with the Slave Heritage Site and whoever ends up controlling these properties. I don't see how anybody would want to take control of these properties without some type of community engagement, whether it's attached to the Slave Heritage Site or not. If I also may, Mr. President, there are two properties, one property behind the Exxon, and then the one property, the skinny property along the east side of Main Street Station that the city owns that are not included in this either. But since those other properties weren't included in this because they didn't need to be, because the city already owns them, they really aren't, they weren't subject to the amended language. But they are adjacent to these properties, and the whole idea is to assemble the properties so you can develop them together rather than piecemeal. And any movement forward would require participation.
May I respond? Mm-hmm. And Mr. Blas, I'd like to support this paper, and I've shared that with you. But I do think that we cannot develop this site in isolation to just a few parcels of land, and the development strategy that needs to be put together in support of the economic development strategy that was presented to us on Monday for the train station, for the farmers market. It also needs to include other land that we currently own, and one of the Achilles heels to the development of this location is the heritage site. And at the present time, I don't know that we have any sense of what is going to be done there, how that is going to be included in the larger plan. It was not a part of the presentation that was made to us for the economic development strategy that we adopted tonight. And I think the absence of a more, and I don't mean Shockoe Bottom as in the boundaries of the community, but the boundaries of the development site that we are reasonably aware of what that is. I think that's critically important to the process. And so I do think that perhaps we need to be absolutely clear that we are incorporating that entire boundaries of the proposed development that we'd like to see.
And I'd be happy to co-patron a resolution with that. I don't think there's a whole lot of time to waste in just asking the EDA, since they've already done most of the work. And we did earlier tonight on the consent agenda pass the approval of the Shockoe revitalization strategy. As even though it's 3 years old, that whole study area went all the way down to Rockets. Mm-hmm. It was the entirety of Shockoe Bottom, including Main Street Station, including the Slave Heritage Site, before there was the plan that we allocated money for last year. So I think clearly nothing moves quickly, but I think asking the EDA to go ahead and try and come back with something sooner rather than later is not going to hurt the city or the development process or the community engagement. I mean, if we push this off to January, it could be February before everything gets ironed out, and that's, we've got some time because the EDA has already done a lot of the legwork.
Ms. Graziano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just guess I want to concur with Ms. Robertson in terms of the EDA coming back to us with what an appropriate price would be, because one of the things, we have a lot of public engagement, if the public sees this as a heritage site, which we clearly want to have there, and as a wonderful park, then that would help us in our decision in terms of whether or not we want to purchase a property. Clearly, to me, we don't want to purchase that property for a huge amount of money without being assured by community planning that what we're going to put in there is going to generate some revenue. I think that what the public sees as being a good use for that property is going to help us should help influence us in terms of whether or not we would want to purchase it. So I think that public input is very important, because it could be that the final price is $18 million and what the public wants is a park. Well, that would be nice, but clearly that would be a very expensive park.
So, Ms. Graziano, you don't want them to negotiate for a purchase price to see what it would cost?
No, what I'm saying is, in conjunction with knowing what the price would be, we need to have the public input in knowing how the public envisions that, so that we make sure that we are not spending a huge amount of money for something that will not return us revenue.
Right.
I think that's an important piece.
I must have misunderstood. Mr. Blas, does this mandate the EDA buy the property?
No. Maybe I'm not making
We
myself
can't be
clear.
spending money for
Let me try one more time. It would be my belief that Mr. Biles put this paper in because he thinks in the long-term interest of the city, it would be a good idea to buy this property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Possibly.
If the public comment comes back to us with something which is non-revenue producing or very little revenue producing, then that would put us in a different place in terms of his idea of buying it, as opposed to if the public comes back with saying a revenue producing use of this property is what we would like. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, you want people to tell you what they want there, absent of what they've said in the downtown master plan.
He's already got it in there for public comment. He just amended it for that.
And
Correct?
No, that's,
I guess the issue is this. Do we want to come to the community and say, this is what it would cost to buy this property, what do you want there, and then determine if it's worth buying it? Or do you want to say, what do you want there, and then we'll negotiate buying it?
Maybe I've been sitting here and too long and my brain went out the front door, but what I thought Ms. Robertson and I thought Mr. Biles wanted was a public engagement in the use of that property.
Okay.
That's what I thought I heard.
And I agree with that. I just want to make sure I understand.
Okay. Didn't I hear that? You did say.
Mr. Blouse, am I right in saying you're saying to the EDA, please go out and see how much it would cost to buy this, and if it's worth it, we'll take it to the public and say, what would you like here?
correct. Why would we go through a planning process and then only find out the price?
So if we
I'm not suggesting, if I could just jump in, I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying that, and maybe I'm not making any sense, but I think Ms. Robertson is hearing me. What I'm saying is that we get a purchase price, we go out to the public with public input on what we want to
with
use.
the purchase price.
We need to have all of that information before we determine whether or not we're going to purchase the property. That's all I'm saying.
I think you and Mr. Beliles agree as to everything except the order. You say we need both the purchase price and what the public wants before we buy it.
Absolutely.
John's saying we need both the purchase price and what the public want before we buy it.
No, what I'm saying is we find out what the price is and then we pledge to have an open and transparent process, which we have not had in the bottom in quite some time.
I see.
But we haven't purchased, we haven't agreed to purchase.
And this paper does not agree to purchase.
No.
It has no fiscal impact. It simply says, here is a price that the owners are willing to sell, and therefore, then we promise to enter into the planning process that's open, fair, and transparent. And if it's not a good deal, I agree with Ms. Graziano. If somebody wants a park and it doesn't produce revenue, it costs $30 million, then
We can't afford it.
it's not a good deal unless we, are flush with cash, which right now we're not.
All right, thank you. Any comments from this side? Dr. Newbill?
Okay. What's left? I would like to similarly support the paper. My challenge here is, again, the fact that we're talking about properties that are not city-owned. These are privately owned properties, but they are sitting right beside the city-owned properties that have been subject of discussion in terms of what we do, especially relative to the heritage site. And so they, not to have that be a part of this discussion and the opportunity to talk about those plots, that land, in addition to the possibility of these, and then the process, I think we would be remiss. And we would be coming out of the discussions, the last iteration of usage for that area and the importance of the heritage site in these discussions, which will help inform and influence what these privately owned might become in relative to that site. And so it's missing that component for me. And if we can amend to accommodate that, I don't know if you'd be open. And just because they're city-owned does not mean that's a reason not to include it. That even more reason, and especially given where we are and the importance of that heritage site in those areas to this whole area and the development thereof.
Any other comments?
Mr. President.
So,
Yes, sir.
So,
I'm sorry, Dr.
So I would ask whether or not this could be amended to incorporate those plots that are city, so that that discussion then is about the whole.
Again, I'd be happy to join you and Ms. Robertson with the resolution moving that forward. Again, we did it in part tonight, approving a plan that has some relevant aspects from several years ago. But I'd really prefer to move this forward because I don't want to lose another 6 weeks in something that shouldn't take the EDA a significant amount of time, given the work that they've already accomplished with environmental reviews and appraisals and the like. And I'd be happy to craft a broader resolution, especially specific to the slave heritage site, but the other properties as well. And before that even could get introduced, we may find that it's not a viable option. Purchase-wise, the price could be astronomical, or it could be affordable.
Even if the purchase is not a viable option, for me, it is still critical that we talk about that heritage site and the development thereof and how that moves forward. I mean, that's...
I agree. I've supported it every step of the way.
I'm losing my voice here just a little bit. So I guess we're sitting, this is December 8th. In a couple of weeks, we'll all be out for holiday. I'm not sure how much time loss. We have 2 sessions in January, that we couldn't make that amendment so that it can go forward, so we're not waiting, till the end.
Well, I think what you're asking for is a little broader than this. I mean, this is focused on the properties we do not own, and somebody else does. And they are critical to establishing development in that area. I think what you are asking for is a broader discussion of development, particularly regards to the slave heritage site.
in the context of this discussion. I mean, these are all properties in close proximity to each other, right in that same zone.
I understand.
So let me ask this question.
That's what I'm saying.
But the purchase price has nothing to do with
Let me ask you guys something. Is there anything in this paper that prohibits a conversation about the properties in Shockoe Bottom city-owned or owned by others in one discussion?
No.
Okay, so we could have that discussion. There's nothing that prevents that. As a resolution, there is no weight of law behind this paper. It's just that we want the EDA to look into how much it would cost to secure the entire area that we're in discussion on. Maybe it's worth it exclusively to purchase it so that we retain the ability to do the archaeological study necessary to preserve what's underneath the ground right now. Maybe it's not worth $30 million for a public park, although with this paper it does suggest that it's for commercial enterprise and not for a public park. At any rate, we need to figure out what the cost is and what the people want. The question is, do we want to do it by having the EDA start by asking or negotiating for a purchase price while we go out separately and ask people what they want? We're allowed to do that under this paper. Do we want to start something tomorrow with the community to have a discussion about what they want down there? This paper doesn't prohibit that one bit. Do we want to ask the EDA to negotiate a price, and if we figure out the price, then we take it to the public and say, this is what it would cost to buy? What do you see as being reasonable for that price? This paper allows for that too. Is that correct?
it is.
So we can have a discussion about the heritage site, which is in other parcels already owned by the city. We can have a discussion about this site, which I believe is a treasure trove of archaeological significance. At the same time, we can separate them should we so desire, but there's nothing prohibiting us from doing these things in tandem. I think I am confused as to why there's a reluctance not to move forward with something that doesn't prohibit us from doing the things we want to do.
Because the amendment doesn't speak to the additional piece being included in the same conversation. I'm just looking at the amendment. It speaks specifically to these parcels, the open, rigorous conversation relative to these without the other. If it did, then we wouldn't be having this discussion. It would be all together. That's all.
Well,
I understand. I understand. Is there any other comment?
Mr. President,
Mr. Hilbert.
let me see here if I can bridge the gap here. I'd be willing to co-patron a paper with whoever would like to join me here in talking about other properties, not the ones involved here, but the other properties in the slave heritage site. And so we can move forward with that. We can do it by expedited consideration, the first meeting in January. And I think that bridges the gap here. What I'm concerned about here, and this whole process has been maddening, but you do something, it's the best way to have an open process is, or the best case scenario is when the city owns the land already. When you look at buying private property, that's when the land speculation comes out there and drives the price up, as we saw with the previous proposal. And so that's what I'm concerned about here, is we're focused in on privately owned property, and we're kind of saying to the market, yes, we might be interested in buying this. Are these parcels going to transfer to another entity who will want even more money for them? I mean, that's why this whole process should have started with the boulevard. Should have something that we own. We had, that there could have been variances in what could happen as far as cost goes. But by golly, that land price was fixed. And it wasn't when we started out in Shockoe Bottom. It went from 4 to 8, I believe here, or don't quote me on that, but it certainly went north. So I just want to put that message out there that we have some idea what these properties are worth. So land speculators, beware, we're not obligating ourselves to do anything. But that's why I've unfortunately spent way too much time in real estate finance in my career. And that's why some of these processes have to be done in private, because when you go out and say, we're looking to buy this parcel and make a commitment to it, you drive up the price of the land. I hope that's, and so that's why we should have gone the other way on Shockoe Bottom. I think we can do this now. We're not obligating ourselves to anything, but, and I've heard loud and clear that we are not transparent enough here at City Hall. And I want to make sure that that is part of this process and every process we have going forward and all that emanate from this body. And I hope that, I mean, people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired about seeing a lack of transparency down here. So I hope that, I believe this is about as transparent as we can get of these are the properties we're looking at. But we don't want to leave behind, I think the most critical part of this is the heritage side and creating a public space there to commemorate and to honor those who in essence lost their lives there, the control over their lives and the lives of their families. Certainly the least we could do to honor them. But that's separate, and we can do that. And as I said, I'll be happy to co-patron a paper to do that at our next meeting, and it will be a complement, if you will, to this paper. And it may involve some privately owned properties, may involve some public properties, or we can just draw a district and say everything within this district, we're looking at it. I hope that bridges the gap. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Newville shakes her head no.
No. It comes close, because the very point that you made, that these properties are probably a treasure trove, that's exactly the case. And so when you start separating it out, I don't think we really do the kind of due diligence to look at the whole, but these privately held, the publicly, and how they would work together, what would be the master plan for that area. And so that's why I'm pushing, so that it's not a separate conversation, it's part and parcel of this overall conversation. If we're going to amass the land, and we already have some, we're going to amass some, we know that it's incredible historical heritage site, then why would we separate the discussion as opposed to, and there are pieces about price for this, but also how does that tie in with this other piece, how we leverage, I mean, it just does not move that whole piece forward. And it's not a major, I mean, it's just including that in the conversation. I guess it isn't, it doesn't seem as major an amendment to add that in the discussion, but maybe I'm just missing.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm just losing my
Mr. President, if I may address that very quickly. The
Yes, sir.
difference is that these properties are privately owned, and some of the other properties may be publicly owned. I mean, if you look at a district, we could have more properties that are privately owned. But that's the difference, is that we're going to have to pay money to purchase these other properties that are already owned by either the state or the city. We won't have to spend money on those. The specific purpose for this is to find out what the price is and to open up the process. Right, but that will begin, I believe.
Does anybody object? I'm not asking for a vote, I'm just asking if anybody objects to having a public process about the use of these lands in conjunction with the lands the city owns. All right. Any other comments before we call the question? Seeing none. Madam Clerk. Yes, ma'am. We can't hear you.
Are you suggesting that this amendment would, you said, you asked if anyone objected.
Does anybody object to having the public process, the public discussion, include the city-owned parcels as well as these?
Right, but that's not what this currently says. So are you
No.
suggesting that we do?
I'm asking if anybody objects to having those two discussions together as one discussion. And nobody seems to object to that.
Right,
Great.
I think we were, but this doesn't get us to that piece of it.
This doesn't get us to that piece of it. It doesn't need to. We all agree we're going to do it that way.
We'll change our mind like the wind. Come on, John.
If that's the case, then your resolution you should be very concerned about, Ms. Robertson. Now then.
May I ask the patron another question, please?
Yes.
Before you call for the vote. Mr. Blouse, I think that, first of all, I want to say that I know that you've continued this paper 1,000 times, and I know we want to move forward with it. And I think we need to do something of this nature to make sure that we can move forward with the development in Shockoe Bottom. It's very important to me that we get something mapped out with citizens' engagement in the process prior to us giving the community the impression again that we may have some secret deal that we're trying to put together as the reason why we want to move forward with negotiation of cost of land and create. I mean, the speculation is so high as it relates to this, and I think it's extremely important that we build trust through this process as we go through it again. Because we're going into the holiday season, the amendment to the paper is not quite what I would like for it to be. I think that the intent, as the attorney has affirmed, is there. Would it be too much of a hardship for us to try to clean that amendment up to this paper and have it for action at the first meeting in January?
I would prefer to finally put this to the council tonight rather than wait. Again, Mr. Hilbert has indicated that he would patron an expedited resolution affirming support for development of the larger parcels. I think, this, as Mr. Hilbert said, it's been made very clear people want transparent. This is the first step in an open process, a transparent process. If this council wants to be involved in economic development, I think we need to make that clear to the public. And if we don't, then, I'm not going to have my feelings hurt if you don't support the vote tonight. I would ask the president to call the question.
Madam Clerk, call the question, please.
Council is voting on item number 40, resolution number 2014-R156 as amended. Mr. Beliles?
Aye.
Ms. Graziano?
Aye.
Ms. Mosby?
Aye.
Mr. Angelasto?
Aye.
Mr. Hilbert?
Aye.
Ms. Trammell?
Aye.
Ms. Newbill? Vice President Robertson?
Aye.
President Samuels?
Aye.
That paper has been adopted.
Thank you. Are there other motions to amend?